What links these three facts? Scotland has been part of the UK for over 300 years. There is an ongoing police investigation into a Scottish political party's campaign funds, and there are currently more than 13,000 nuclear warheads on Earth.
A flash, a blast, the release of deadly radioactive rays.
These might not sound all that relevant to each other, but they are connected. And we were about to find out why. After more than 3,500 kilometres on the road, we'd left Ireland behind and crossed over to Scotland. A nation of 5.5 million people that is breathtakingly beautiful. Its mountains and lochs are like a slice of Scandinavia in the UK. But it might not be that way forever. Scotland became part of the UK in 1707, over 300 years ago. But a big chunk of the population here doesn't want it to remain that way. In 2014, there was an independence referendum here. 45% voted for Scotland to go its own way as an independent country, 55% to remain in the Union. So, for now, it remains part of the United Kingdom. But since then, there's been talk of another vote, especially after Brexit, because Scotland voted overwhelmingly to remain in the EU. At the time we were cycling here, a second referendum actually looked quite likely. So as we pedalled through the Scottish landscape, I wondered how much longer we would be able to cycle through a united kingdom.
When a neutron strikes, the atom is split. Released neutrons split other atoms. The result is atomic energy. Shall the people of the world use this energy for the destruction or the betterment of mankind?
July 16th, 1945. The first nuclear bomb is detonated by the USA in New Mexico. And for the first time in human history, we developed a weapon capable of wiping out entire civilizations.
A deadly radioactive cloud rises over 7 miles.
August 6th, 1945. A nuclear bomb called the Fat Man is dropped by an American bomber on the Japanese city of Nagasaki, closely followed by the Little Boy, which is dropped on Hiroshima 3 days later. The blasts kill somewhere between 129,000 and 226,000 people. To this day, the two bombings are the only use of atomic weapons in armed conflict. August 29th, 1949. The Soviet Union detonates its first atomic bomb, and the nuclear arms race begins. It culminates in 1986, when 10 countries collectively possess over 60,000 nuclear warheads. The vast majority are held by the USA and Soviet Union. After 1986, thanks to non-proliferation treaties, the number of nukes begins to decline for the first time since their creation. On March 24th, 1993, South Africa becomes the first nuclear state to voluntarily dismantle all of its nuclear weapons. Through the 1990s, former Soviet states, Ukraine, Belarus and Kazakhstan, transfer their nuclear weapons to Russia after the collapse of the Soviet Union. That brings us to today. There are 5 recognised nuclear weapon states, 3 more that have declared possession of nukes, and 1 whose nuclear weapon status is, deliberately, unclear. Together, they possess 13,080 nuclear warheads. So what's all this got to do with Scotland? The United Kingdom was the 3rd country in the world to develop a nuclear weapon, and it now has 225 of them stockpiled. Britain's nuclear capabilities come from the Trident nuclear programme, This is made up of 4 submarines carrying nuclear missiles. And ever since 1969, at least one of them has always been at sea, somewhere, providing a constant nuclear capability. Their movements are so secret that most of the crew don't even know their location. The whole system relies on the idea of mutually assured destruction. There aren't many ways to stop a barrage of nuclear missiles heading our way. But even if Britain was nuked into oblivion, whoever launches that strike knows that there is at least one submarine hiding beneath the waves that could launch a retaliatory strike. The result would be so devastating for both sides that no sane leader would order a first strike. It might sound like a high-stakes gamble, but this nuclear deterrent is currently the only real defense we have against a nuclear attack. And here is where Scotland comes in, because the bases that host these submarines need pretty specific conditions. And they currently operate from Faslane on Scotland's west coast. Here, the water is deep enough for submarines to come in and out, and there's a lot of cloud cover, so it's often hidden from satellites that might be watching overhead. The thing is, a significant minority of people in Scotland oppose Trident, or any nuclear weapons programme for that matter. In 2016, out of 59 Scottish MPs in Parliament, only 1 voted in favour of renewing Trident. But in the UK as a whole, it received overwhelming government support. So Trident lives on. But if these nuclear submarines are based in Scotland, and Scotland votes to become independent, what happens to all these weapons then? This is where anti-nuclear campaigners sense an opportunity.
Nuclear weapons are a symbol of a culture that says forcing people to do things is okay. Spending money in order to destroy people is okay. Engaging in practices that are going to destroy the planet. And I think the best possible way of contributing to us not doing that lies through independence. It's the shortest route to getting rid of the UK's nuclear weapons, because the UK government hasn't got anywhere else to put them. They put them here because they don't think we matter. They're in Scotland because they need deep water, and that's where the fjord coast is, and the cloud cover, the rain, so the submarines can come in and be undetected. But it's also because there are areas that are large enough to accommodate nuclear warheads in large numbers being stored in what is described as a remote area, although it's actually only 25 miles from Glasgow. The UK government really don't want to talk about nuclear weapons. They don't want to acknowledge that the nuclear weapons are in Scotland and they can't put them anywhere else. And if we get independence and tell them to get stuffed with their nuclear weapons, they're going to have a really hard road to hoe. Their backs are really against the wall, so they don't want us to have that conversation.
But why exactly would Scottish independence be such a problem for Britain's nuclear programme? Well, Faslane is home to 2 bases, on the edge of a deep fjord. On one side is Naval Base Clyde. This is where the Trident nuclear submarines can dock and be serviced. Just across the water is the Royal Naval Armaments Depot, Coulport, where Britain's nuclear weapons are stored. Built during the Cold War and covering 1,600 acres, it has 16 underground bunkers sealed with airlocked doors, capable of storing up to 36 nuclear missiles between them. Many of the facilities are designed to withstand fires, explosions, tidal surges, and even the very rare prospect of an earthquake. These bases are eye-wateringly expensive, and you can't just pick them up and move them. So if Scotland became independent and chose not to allow the UK to continue using its bases or storing its nuclear weapons there, that would be a massive problem for the Trident nuclear programme. In Scotland, The biggest political party is the pro-independence Scottish National Party, or SNP.
And for Scotland, the hope lies in becoming an independent nation. We are winning the case for independence.
And while a plurality of the Scottish public is actually in favour of keeping Trident, in 2021, all SNP candidates for Scottish Parliament pledged that an independent Scotland would never allow nuclear weapons on its territory. So if Scotland gained independence under the SNP, the UK would be in a bind. It could attempt to find another site in its own territory, but suitable areas are few and far between. Extremely expensive to develop and risk massive local protests from people who don't want new nuclear bases on their doorsteps. With all the facilities that would need to be built, relocating Trident somewhere else in the UK could take 20 years and cost up to £50 billion, on top of the already massive costs of maintaining the nuclear programme in its current form. A backup plan could see the UK turn to an ally, like the USA or France, to try and operate the submarines from their bases. But there's no guarantee that an ally would agree to do that, and even if it did, it would be extremely costly too, not to mention politically unpopular for both the UK and host country. There were once rumours of a third option. In the last independence referendum, the British Ministry of Defence came up with a plan to turn Faslane into a sovereign military base. That would mean that anything inside it is officially UK territory. Scotland would likely be outraged if that happened, and a plan like that might actually increase the chances of a yes vote on Scottish independence in the future, which might be why the British government has publicly denied that this is a plan. With no good options for the British government and two very expensive ones, an independent Scotland could, in theory, mark the beginning of the end of the Trident nuclear programme.
Why would you want to have these things that are so crazily dangerous for the whole planet that can't be used in any kind of conflict? Even if you believe in the use of force, you can't really accept the idea that the use of nuclear weapons is a possibility. The drain on resources is enormous, and the danger that is attached to their existence. It's about choosing the contribution that we want to make in the world, rather than being subject to decisions that are a complete anathema to us. Scotland can contribute to international peace and justice, or it can remain as it currently is, a launch pad for the UK government to wage war.
But a year or two is a long time in politics. In 2022, Russia invaded Ukraine in the largest attack on a European country since World War II. Remember that time Ukraine gave up its nukes to Russia? Ironically, part of that agreement was that Russia would provide security guarantees to Ukraine. Now, this invasion highlights a question. Even if nuclear weapons are unimaginably destructive and their use unthinkable, can we afford to give them up when nations like Russia possess them and threaten nuclear strikes seemingly on a weekly basis? In short, are nukes a necessary evil? Another big change happened closer to home. At the time of filming, things had seemed to be going well for the Scottish independence campaign. The SNP were just one seat away from an outright majority in Scottish Parliament in the last elections, and support for Scottish independence has risen since Brexit. So the SNP was riding high. What could possibly go wrong? First came a UK Supreme Court ruling on the SNP's plans for a second independence referendum, which they'd hoped to organise in 2023.
The Scottish Parliament has no power to legislate in relation to matters that are reserved to the United Kingdom Parliament at Westminster.
Next, the resignation of the SNP's very popular leader.
Now, another big story today. Scotland's First Minister is resigning. Nicola Sturgeon has led the Scottish National Party, which wants independence from Britain for more than 8 years.
The part of serving well would be to know when the time is right to make way for someone else. I know that time is now.
And last but not least,
dramatic development in Scottish politics. A 58-year-old man has been arrested this morning and is understood at this stage to be Peter Murrell, the husband of Nicola Sturgeon.
An emergency meeting of SNP politicians has been taking place within the last hour. It follows the arrest of the party's treasurer, Colin Beattie.
Some breaking news from Scotland, where the former First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, has been arrested.
Today, she becomes the third senior member of her party to be arrested in connection with this investigation.
Operation Branchform, an investigation into potential fundraising fraud in the SNP relating to its use of almost £700,000, saw the arrests of 3 senior party figures. Now, all 3 of these people were released without charge, but the investigation is ongoing. So the SNP, which was leading the push for independence, had suffered a blow to its image, lost a very popular leader, and been dealt a serious legal setback. There are more factors that have damaged the independence campaign and SNP, but these are 3 of the biggest stories. So those in favour of Trident and Britain's nuclear programme can sleep a little easier. It's easy to look at macro politics as just that. But think about this for a moment. The very future of the UK's nuclear weapons programme, which in turn impacts NATO's nuclear deterrent and global security, has, in part, been shaped by one resignation, a police investigation, and a British court ruling. Nevertheless, despite their setbacks, in 2023, the new leader of the SNP, Humza Yousaf, reiterated the SNP's stance, saying that an independent Scotland wouldn't host nukes on its territory. A second Scottish independence referendum once seemed like it was just on the horizon, but now looks very unlikely in the near term. But there is still substantial support for an independent Scotland. And if it ever does happen, it's worth keeping in mind the implications it could have not just for Scotland, but for global security, the UK's nuclear weapons, and even NATO's defence capabilities.